All right, let's talk about something incredibly important, the silent killers of cardiology. We're diving deep into the primary electrical diseases of the heart. You know, these are the genetic ghosts that can cause sudden cardiac death in young people who seem perfectly healthy, with hearts that look completely normal on the outside. Let's get right into it.
So picture this. It's a classic high-stakes clinical puzzle. A young athlete, a competitive swimmer, collapses mid-race. You find out their heart is structurally sound. Their baseline ECG? Totally unremarkable. This is exactly where a sharp clinical mind stands out from the rest. The answer is hiding in the heart's electrical system, and our goal today is to give you the framework to solve these puzzles every single time.
So first, let's start by unpacking this whole idea, the sudden death puzzle, and really try to understand what's going on when young hearts just stop.
Okay, let's get our terms straight because it's super important. Sudden cardiac arrest, or SCA, is the event itself, that abrupt, catastrophic loss of heart function. The key is it's potentially reversible. Sudden cardiac death, or SCD, is the tragic outcome if you can't reverse it. And for a witnessed event, that timeline is tight. We're talking within 1 hour of symptoms starting. This distinction is absolutely crucial.
You know, the world of sudden death is pretty much split in two by a single number, 35. If you're over 35, the villain is almost always coronary artery disease. Basically, the plumbing is blocked. But in the younger crowd, under 35, it's a completely different story. Here, we're not dealing with plumbing. We're dealing with the wiring, the channelopathies, or problems with the heart muscle itself, the cardiomyopathies. And today, we're focusing squarely on those electrical diseases.
All right, let's open up our first case file, long QT syndrome. In this disorder, it's all about cardiac repolarization. Put simply, the heart's electrical system just takes too long to recharge between beats. And this quote right here is a perfect example of a core principle. The diagnosis is so often hidden in the story. I mean, this single sentence is almost pathognomonic. Fainting, what we call syncope, triggered by a sudden loud noise like an alarm clock, your brain should immediately jump to a specific subtype of long QT syndrome. It's these triggers, these little pieces of the story, that are absolute gold for your clinical reasoning. Think of this table as your high-yield cheat sheet for long QT syndrome. For LQT1, the classic trigger is exercise, especially something like swimming because of that massive adrenaline surge. The ECG clue? Look for broad-based T waves. Now for LQ2, like in our little story, the trigger is sound or intense emotion. The ECG is going to show you notched T waves. And finally, LQ3 is the odd one out. The danger here is at rest or during sleep, when the heart rate is slow. You'll spot late peaking T waves. Knowing these connections between the gene type and the clinical picture is, well, it's non-negotiable. So how do we manage it? Well, it's a pretty logical step-by-step approach. First line for LQT1 and 2 is a non-selective beta blocker. Nadolol is usually preferred. This just blunts that adrenergic surge that triggers the events. For LQT3, which is actually a sodium channel problem, we can add mexiletine to specifically target that late sodium current. Step 3 is just common sense, but it's critical. Avoid any drug that can prolong the QT interval. And finally, an ICD, or implantable cardioverter defibrillator, that's reserved for people who've already survived an arrest or who keep fainting despite being on the right meds. All right, on to our second case file, Brugada Syndrome. Now, if long QT is about slow repolarization everywhere, Brugada is different. It's a regional repolarization problem, specifically in the right ventricle. And it comes from a dysfunctional sodium channel.
I mean, just look at all the clues packed into this one little story. A young man, often of Southeast Asian descent, fainting, especially during sleep. The partner reporting strange agonal breathing at night, and a fever. Every single one of these is a classic red flag for Brugada syndrome. And fever. Fever is a really potent trigger because it can unmask or even worsen that characteristic ECG pattern.
And this is the ECG finding you absolutely have to burn into your memory. The type 1 Brugada pattern. People often call it the shark fin sign, and you can totally see why. It's this coved ST segment elevation of at least 2 millimeters, and you'll see it in leads V1 or V2, the leads looking right at the right ventricle. When you see this spontaneous pattern, it's diagnostic. You're done. No need for any other tests.
So for a symptomatic patient with that classic type 1 pattern, the only proven life-saving therapy is an ICD. Period.
Unlike long QT, there isn't really a reliable preventative medication, though you can use quinidine to try and stop an electrical storm. And, given what we know about the triggers, it is absolutely vital to treat any fever aggressively and to make sure they avoid drugs that block sodium channels, like class IC antiarrhythmics or cocaine.
Okay, pay very close attention here. This is a massive exam trap. You find a type 1 Brugada pattern on an ECG for a patient who's completely asymptomatic. Maybe they just came in for a routine checkup. What do you do? The answer is not to rush to implant an ICD. Managing these asymptomatic patients is really complex, and it often involves more tests to figure out their risk. But just automatically implanting an ICD is wrong, and it's a super common pitfall.
Okay, let's pause for a second. Time for a quick recall checkpoint. Think about this new scenario. A child collapses during a soccer game. Intense exertion. You get a 12-lead ECG in the emergency room, and it is perfectly, frustratingly normal. What is at the absolute top of your differential diagnosis? Take a moment to think about it. That normal resting ECG. That's the key clue.
All right, let's hit a rapid-fire review of the answer to that question, CPVT, and a few other key points. And there's your answer. Catecholaminergic Polymorphic Ventricular Tachycardia, or CPVT. This is a disease of calcium handling inside the heart muscle cells. So during an adrenaline surge, like in that soccer game, calcium just leaks out when it shouldn't. This causes delayed after depolarizations and triggers a really dangerous arrhythmia. But its most sinister feature, and the answer to our question, is that the resting ECG is almost always completely normal.
So the classic triad for CPVT that you need to know is this. First, a child or adolescent with syncope that happens specifically during exercise or high emotion. Second, that deceptively normal resting ECG. And third, the diagnosis is confirmed with a stress test, which provokes the characteristic arrhythmia known as bidirectional VT. And this brings us to our second critical exam trap, which is also a life-saving clinical pearl. Exertional syncope in a child is never, ever benign until proven otherwise. It is not just a fainting spell or vasovagal syncope. You have to have a high index of suspicion for a lethal channelopathy like CPVT or LQT1. Missing this is a catastrophic error.
Okay, let's lock these concepts in with some quick memory anchors. For long QT triggers, it's easy. LQT1 is for one intense exercise. LQT2, think 2 ears for sound or emotion. And LQT3, think 3 pillows for rest and sleep.
For Brugada, the anchor is visual. Just picture that shark fin in V1 and V2. Remember that fever is the enemy, and the biggest danger is during sleep. And for CPVT, the anchor is the whole story. A child is playing and collapses. Their resting ECG is totally clean. You only unmask the diagnosis with the stress test, which reveals that classic bidirectional VT. And we'll end the core teaching with this thought, which really sums up our entire approach today. You know, while all the genetics and electrophysiology stuff is complex, for you as a clinician, the most powerful diagnostic tool you have is your ability to listen. The clues are in the family history, the specific triggers, the story of the event itself. You have to be a clinical detective. To really lock in this knowledge and make sure it sticks, go ahead and access the comprehensive, high-yield notes and the full-color mind map that are linked right below. Use them to test yourself and truly master these concepts.